Okay, everyone, we want to welcome you to a special edition of ARCS Chat. My name is Robin Bauer Kilgo. I'm one of your hosts this afternoon. Just a quick few technical notes.
Okay, everyone, we want to welcome you to
quick few technical notes. There is a slight delay from when we're talking and when we actually see the chat below in the YouTube chat. So just be aware of that slight delay. And we are going to be recording this entire talk. So you can keep an eye on it for either a podcast or a video later this week. And without further ado, I'm going to hand the mic over to the other host, John Robinette.
Hey everyone, welcome to this very special edition. As Robin mentioned, I'm John Robinette.
John, your mic is not working right now, so we might have to pop you back in and pop you back out.
Let's
see if we can get his audio going.
Not hearing me?
Just give him 1 sec.
I'm here, John.
All right, you hear me?
How's this? Better? So our other co-host, Amanda Robinson, couldn't be with us today because she actually has to move some objects in her museum. Lucky her. So with that, we want to wish everybody, health and safety at this very difficult moment in, both the history of the world, as well as our profession, and hope that these extra discussions and podcasts have provided not only a little bit of relief from the relentless anxiety of coronavirus news, but also a dose of professional development, some real solutions, and also a sense of community to help us deal with these issues that we all face as a result of this virus. Today, we're going to focus on the solutions and community as we investigate what will happen with our loans and exhibitions that the virus has actually paralyzed. We will also dare to think about how this crisis ends and what to expect when the gears of society begin to turn again. With us to discuss the situation is the most epic group of shippers the world can assemble. Just a note too on the attendance. This group is assembled based on sponsorship to ARCS, as well as their availability. There are many shippers we invited but couldn't participate. But those who could participate, I will now introduce. Our platinum level sponsor from ISAFAT, Jonathan Schwartz, the president, who's also, I believe his title is art handler at Atelier 4. Did I get that correct, Jonathan?
Art handler, sure. You can call me an art handler. I haven't been an art handler for like 30 years, but yeah.
You would if you had to. Our gold level sponsors participating are Cooke's Crating from Los Angeles with their owner, Bryan Cooke here. From Philadelphia, Atelier, Derek Jones, the executive director, is here.
Hello.
From Turtle in the Netherlands, Marco Oosterwjk, who's the director, is here.
Hi, everybody.
Silver level sponsors in participation are from Masterpiece, the president of Fine Arts and Security Group, John O'Halloran.
Hi, everybody.
The owner of Dietl, Fritz Dietl, is here. From Boxart in Brooklyn, the director of production, Meg Colbert's present.
Hello, everybody.
And I already mentioned Atelier 4. Bronze level sponsors include from Crozier, Paige Armstrong, who's an account manager.
Hi, everyone.
Simon Dent, the Museum and Exhibition Services Manager from Martinspeed, is here. Martinspeed in the UK.
Everyone. Hello.
From SIT Spain, Ana Tabuenca, the Director of Fine Art Department.
Good morning, good afternoon.
And last but not least, from Transport Consultants International, TCI, Bob Simon, the president, is here.
Hi, everyone.
We would first like to thank these companies that we all depend on for their critical help, both now and always. And ARCS would specifically like to thank them for their continued support, because literally without them, ARCS would not exist. We also want to thank all of the sponsors in general. We only invited shippers onto this, but we have many other sponsors that are from other aspects of the industry, which are also a critical role. I will be listing them out at the end of the program. To all those listening live, remember to sign into your YouTube or Google account, just like you sign into your Gmail account, and chat with the personnel that are on the panel, as well as the others in the chat room. Please direct questions to specific panelists if you can. This helps to avoid any confusion because there are many people involved. I'm going to monitor the chat section so that you can and relay any questions that you have to the panelists. Because the panel is large, I'm going to moderate pretty heavily, probably more than normal. So just please take that into consideration. And remember that there is a delay. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. We already have a very active chat room. So and a lot of people from all over, mostly the US, it looks like right now. So first off, I want to go straight to Jonathan as the president of ISAFAT. Are there any consistent requirements for disaster preparedness amongst the members? How does the threat of coronavirus fit into preparedness for this type of planning?
Well, crisis management was and still is a topic brought up perennially at ISAFAT. And as a matter of fact, years ago, back when Excel commissioned risk surveyors to create GRASP, and this is before Simon Hornby joined Crozier, Bob Crozier himself from our community back then put together best practices with some of the other members. And independently, many of us also started working on similar projects. Of course, none of that really addressed a plague, because that's kind of what we have now. I mean, there are other, responses to emergencies that kind of fit into this same wheelhouse. The economic impact of 2008, we're going to certainly see a whirlwind of possible major downturns come from that. So really, right now, it's all about similar things that institutions are thinking about. How few can you rely on in order to keep systems running and safely? Because at a certain point, some people have serious deep pockets, but others need to make sure that they have enough operating capital to hit the ground running when there's a return. So there are furloughs. Furloughs are happening. They're a reality.
Has anyone here not had to furlough any staff? Yeah.
I've not.
How did you, Bob and Marco, how did you manage that? Is that,
well,
do you just have small staff?
Small, and we were conservative with how we deployed our money. And the advantage we have is that of our outside offices, other than New Jersey, they already worked from their house. And so it gave us the ability to keep some continuity, and the money side is difficult, but doable.
Yeah. And how about you, Marco?
Yeah, in the Netherlands, there was quite quickly after the crisis, the Dutch government came up with a package that for the next 3 to 6 months, all the salaries are compensated for companies that lose between 60 and 90% of their business, which in our case is the case. So we are expecting to get 90% of our salaries back from the government.
I see. Is anyone else getting government assistance? Yeah, Anna from Spain.
Yes, well, in Spain, it depends on what each company is asking to the state to be helped. Okay, so they are called ERTES, which is a temporal status when you cannot afford to pay 100% to your people. So SIT have asked for the 70%. It's something similar as for Healthcare in Holland. But some companies in the same field have asked for the 100%. And then that means that those companies that have asked for the 100%, they cannot operate at all. They cannot simply they cannot work at all. It would be illegal because they are receiving the 100% support because they supposed to not be able to come into the company single euro.
Right. Is so in from our collections professional point of view, we're all, we have disaster plans out the wazoo, continuity. I cannot say this. Continuity of operations, planning, and programming. So we're always sort of prepared for this. So when museums got the signal to lock down, everyone pretty much knew what to do and how their museum was going to operate. How is it that companies like yours prepare for these situations? What does a disaster preparedness look like from your point of view? Does anyone have any thoughts? Yeah, John.
So, we had a business continuity plan in place to begin with, but, like Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan and then they get punched in the face. So we have a corporate level, HR and IT, making sure, that people can work remotely and work from home and have the necessary tools to be able to work remotely, not even thinking that it would get to a point when we first started with this, with a pandemic sort of plan in January. We started having meetings for this thinking, well, what's the worst case scenario going to be if we can't everybody get to the office? Can we work from home? So we started planning for that. And, soon enough, that was the case. So for us, it was, being that we're a nationwide country with a few hundred people, having a hierarchy from corporate, IT, HR, and then individual teams regionally leading sort of a SWAT practice to make sure offices can be closed and clean, the staff can get home and can work properly, and spreading the sort of workload across the managers regionally.
Yeah, Anna?
Well, in our case, we immediately made a plan, but always combining the restrictions by the government, because in one side there were restrictions for the movement, for the people. You all know that in different levels and in different timing. So we had to adapt the company services and people to that restrictions. At the same time, we made a plan to finance and ensure the payments to all people. So I maybe should call it like a financial strong money at the end to ensure that the company can keep running, and to make a reactivation plan we made already. So that's the reason why SIT have asked for the 70% and not the 100% of ERTE by the state. This means that with this 30%, we can work, we can do like a minimum service, so we can ensure that customs operations are open, that general cargo is completely open, so we can operate at the end. We can move our trucks. We can do all kind of operations, but in this measure, like up to 30% of our time or possibilities or infrastructure.
Derek, you had something to say?
I think, if on the Packer side, is like a lot of us have plans for disasters as far as like a natural disaster, but I don't think anybody ever expects for there to be zero work for any of your employees or, and almost overnight. So, I think, our storage warehouses are still manned and staffed so that we can protect the work that's there. But I don't think anybody on this call or webcast could even imagine that in a week's time, there's literally zero work for anybody, right? And that's just a trickle down. So, you know, it's an interesting thing where you have a disaster plan that's based around more potential work most of the time, right? So if there's a disaster, it's the shippers and the packers are going to get more work and protect the artifact. In this case, the disaster is literally that there is no work and that everything you need to just kind of clean up the mess that's existing and then stop. And so, you know, I think from our side of things, it was really interesting. You know, our team's been fantastic. We've kept about 25% of our staff on to just, and they're all part-time, but we're like basically getting our plans for reopening back together. And that's all we've been focusing on, and how to take care of the staff that we did have to furlough, because we knew that that was something that was inevitable. And so we try to act as quick as possible with that, honestly, so that we could, you know, take care of healthcare for 5 months rather than take care of healthcare for a month. You know, we wanted to just take whatever resources we had, and figuring that the government was going to have to step in to help everybody. And so we kind of focused on our strategy just being on, when we reopen, trying to be a strong company again.
Yeah, Meg?
Yeah, just to, I mean, kind of chime in, we also had a disaster preparedness plan, but obviously it wasn't set up for a pandemic. Specifically, it was more kind of concerned with a natural disaster like a hurricane. But we were able to use aspects of that plan, mostly in terms of the leadership structure that we had identified in the case of a situation where we wouldn't be able to access the facility. But at the beginning, before New York pause went into effect, our main concern was establishing some sort of system for our employees so that we could keep them updated and keep them safe. And since we've shut down, sort of our main focus has been working to establish what the protocols for worker safety will be once we reopen, in terms of what kind of PPE they will be wearing, how we will enforce social distancing in an appropriate and safe way in workplaces where traditionally we're not keeping 6 feet apart when we handle art or when we're packing a crate. And so that's been a major sort of project for us right now during the closure, is to kind of establish what we're hoping will be guidelines that, you know, we can share with our partner institutions that we work with as clients, as well as other companies who do the same thing that we do, so that we kind of see a universal approach to worker safety after the pandemic, so that we're all on the same page in terms of those issues.
That was another question I had, is that everybody, I assume there's some level of warehouse activity for pretty much everyone, just for security. What are the protocols for taking care of your employees at this time? Fritz and Jonathan, you guys both wanted to say something? Go ahead, Fritz, and then we'll go to Jonathan so Fritz can talk.
Well, you know, really I mean, just to follow up on what Meg mentioned, I mean, it's like really establishing very strict protocols of, you know, social distancing, and then also splitting teams. And it's like, I'm, you know, not only running Dietl International, but also some warehouses in Delaware. And obviously these warehouses need to continue to function and to run and to be secure. So there are crews working in those warehouses. And one of the ways that we can do that right now is to have week off, week on teams, and making sure that the functions of the facility manager, there's more than one person who can actually make sure that the facility is safe and all the systems are working in the facilities. So there's a lot of protocols that some of it we're really inventing on the fly right now, because again, this is not something that any of us has planned for. This is all new territory for us. But those are the things that we have to do. Protective gear, strict protocols. There are still surprise. There's still every once in a while there's a truck showing up at the warehouse bringing something in that's already on the way. There's still some shipments moving around. I think we're going to come to some of these questions a little bit later on. What are the protocols for those scenarios? I mean, how do we keep people safe? How do we keep the truckers outside, my people inside the warehouse, and still have a proper handoff of property and the safe hand of the property that we are handling. So all these things we are thinking about and we're addressing right now. And, you know, again, back to Meg, you know, this is all new territory. We're making some of it up on the fly, but obviously it's a big concern for everybody to make sure that your crew is safe and that you can continue to operate. You know, these warehouses need to be staffed. There is no other way. We all know that.
Jonathan?
Yeah. Yeah, just a little bit to add to that. You know, in the U.S. in particular, because this is a little U.S. centric today, even though we've got some people from overseas on here. But we live in a sort of confederacy because states have their own little rules about mandates that come in. And for the 4 locations that A4 has, for instance, it's a little vague in Florida what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. Whereas in New York, in California, and even now in North Carolina, it's pretty much a pause. But even though we're not allowed to work, obviously for safety reasons and just to check on climate, you know, there's only so much we can do remotely. A lot of those functions, we can take a look at our phone and see how the climate is on a variety of rooms, see how the closed caption video is working. But we have a rotation of a skeleton crew to be there because every so often, as Fritz mentions, a truck shows up. And if it's coming in for an existing account, we feel like we can't just, you know, orphan it. We have to deal with it. And the protocols that we've set for that has a lot to do with distancing because we don't know who those drivers are or what they've done. And we ask them for them to show us outside what they have for us. And then we have them drive the truck into our loading dock and we take it out of the truck very carefully. We wipe it down and then they go away. We do the documentation, the signing of the paperwork separately. We're not anywhere near these people because, again, we don't know where they've been. And during the very end of this, as it was starting to shut down, we still had shuttles on the road that were on their way back to the home office. And one of them was tested in Texas, and he had a temperature, and we were concerned that he was infected, and we didn't get the test for another 4 days back, and luckily he was negative. But I mean, we had to keep him and his co-driver together and quarantine them until we knew that they were safe to go away. And this is crazy. Anyway, I deviated from the topic.
I do want to, you know, in reference to what a few of you have said, there are shipments happening right now. Paige, as someone who is dealing, you know, directly as an account manager with clients, are you still seeing, you know, a lot of requests for things, or, you know, there's stuff out on the road?
Definitely still receiving incoming requests. So I would describe it sort of as a wave as this happened, of like how that happened. It was a reshuffling of existing projects, of course, as we learned more about the situation, but that's sort of subsided now. And now of the clients that are able to plan more long-term for exhibitions, of course, we're working on those projects. But for example, I mean, I know this is specific to institutions and museums, but I also work with private clients, and I know everyone on this call does too, or galleries, for example. So now would be the season when we would have a lot of work in the Hamptons area with installing with homes and outdoor sculptures and etc. So I'm still receiving those requests, and we field them as they come in and respond accordingly. And there's obviously, as Jonathan mentioned, everything varies state by state, how we can conduct ourselves in our Connecticut facility versus New York versus Hamptons varies widely and changes honestly week by week and day by day. So it's a constant process. But so yes, things are ongoing, but it's become a lot about conversations and just staying in touch with clients and seeing what we can do.
Derek, you want to add something?
I guess it's kind of more of a question for everybody on the call, but it's, you know, we have a facility in New York, one in Philadelphia, one in Delaware, and now one in DC. And you could see the time chain all started in New York. So whatever New York did, a couple days later, it happened in Philadelphia. And then a week later, it happened in Delaware. And then like 10 days later, it happened in DC. So it kind of seems to me like, you know, New York is the gauge for us all to get back to work. Because if New York's not operational, then the rest of the art market has a real struggle on coming back together, just things coming in through JFK or whatever it might be, at least on the Eastern Seaboard. So just kind of more of a question for everybody, if everybody feels the same way, that is a trickle down that starts with New York.
Actually, I can answer that. It's going to be very asymmetrical, because even if things started in New York the way you say they will, it's going to peter out here in a lot further down the road, because we have way too many infections in the state, especially in the New York City area. So I think you'll find other areas of the country. I mean, they're already starting to open up here and there. I think New York, I mean, my crystal ball's a little vague on that right now, but I mean, I was feeling originally, my gut reaction is like, we're not going to see anything until like the third week of August. And then I hear people talking about May and June. So now I'm like thinking maybe early July, late June in New York. But that could mean DC is already working again. I don't know.
Bob?
So we're not seeing a whole lot moving around. A little bit. We did do a little bit of work in the last month, but not much. And I agree that New York is going to be, as Jonathan said, it's going to be a long road before it's going again. But there are people starting to stir. Texas is going to start opening the end of this or end of next week. And Georgia is also starting to open, even though I don't know how they can really be doing it. So things are going to open in sporadic fits and bursts. And I think one of the issues that we've talked about is what happens to something if a shuttle is going and all of a sudden the city is going to shuts down in the middle of a run. And it's something we're still talking about. And there's really no good answer, because you don't know when it's going to happen or where it's going to happen. But I'm a little more optimistic in that I think that more things will be happening towards the middle of May, end of May. But I think big things moving is going to be a while. I mean, I don't know. And it also will depend on, for the museum world, if the museums are even willing to take big shipments, where, how can you do social distancing when you have a trailer load of crates coming off, and some of them are not small. So it's something that we all have to sort of deal with, and we should all deal with cooperatively, and we all figure it out together.
Simon, come in, and then we'll have Fritz.
Yeah, one of the issues that there is in the UK is the question of export licenses, because the whole export licensing unit that belongs to the Arts Council, part of the government, is closed. The office closed on the 20th of March, and it's closed indefinitely. They may open up again at the end of May, but then that's when they begin processing all of the export license requests, which can take up to 5 weeks. So if a US museum were asking for a loan tomorrow, the earliest that we could see that would be sent out if it required a license would be sort of mid-June, probably the end of June. And that's a sort of best case scenario. There's another issue, which is just the backlog of work that there will be in all of the government offices, as well as all of the shippers, that there will be so much that needs doing at the same time that it's going to cause some delay as well. So before things, for things to come back to any kind of normality, it is probably August, September, and I think that is the time frame that most museums here are looking towards.
Yeah, and Fritz?
All right, so the original question was, are there still shipments happening? And yes, there are shipments happening. And there are clients really itching and wanting to get things done all the time. So we're getting a lot of requests like, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? Every single day. Questions like this are coming in. So, and that touches really a lot of different areas of what we are talking about. So number one, can it be done, and can it be done safely? Number two is, should we do it? And those are really the two major questions. And the should we do it? How essential is it? Because in a lot of parts of this country, logistics is considered an essential business. So theoretically, all of us, at least in the United States, are allowed to operate to some degree or completely, to every degree. When you think about it, you know, your UPS and FedEx trucks are arriving at your doorstep every single day. So whatever that gadget you're ordering on Amazon, is that essential business? You know, is the artwork less essential than you know, the book that you're ordering on Amazon? Who knows? No, you know, I don't have the answer for that. But these are decisions that we need to make, you know, as business owners and together with our clients. Do you really need this? Does this really have to happen now? And then if you need it, can it be done safely? And, you know, then, you know, if it can be done safely, how would we execute it? Because nothing runs normal right now. You know, for example, I mean, in our world, we are used to having at least 2 guys on the truck. I will not dispatch a truck right now with 2 men on the truck. That's just not proper social distancing to put 2 people on the same truck for like hours at a time. That just doesn't make any sense. If you really need a second person on it, you know, maybe I'll have a follow car behind it, but it will get very expensive. There may be a separate crew wherever it is going to take something off the truck. So again, as much separation as possible between different things, if you even want to do it and if you even decide to do it. And then the other thing, Jonathan spoke about that already, is like we're a confederacy. There's different rules everywhere. It's like if you operate in DC, you have different rules in DC, in Virginia, in Maryland, in every single, and within like, you know, half an hour, you have 3 different regulations that you have to follow. So
there's a lot of people that want to go ahead, finish up.
No, go ahead, please.
There's a lot of people that want to chime in. Plus, we're also an hour in, and I haven't asked any of the questions, and we got a ton of questions from the panel. Meg, can you be quick?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to kind of add on to that I think one of the big projects coming out of this is going to be managing our clients' expectations about timelines and sort of redefining what those timelines look like with this new world that we're entering into. And I think that's something that maybe as an industry, we need to kind of focus on rethinking in a lot of ways.
Exactly. All right. So we have a ton of questions from people that are following along on YouTube Live. Thank you so much for putting those out there. I appreciate everybody being able to stick around. It's already been an hour, like I said. So Robin, can you tell us some of the questions that have come in that we can address?
Sure. One of the early ones was, how do these companies plan on prioritizing business once they are allowed to open up? Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Paige.
Well, that's something that we're talking about a lot, obviously, internally. But to start, we are obviously going to prioritize projects that were pre-existing and, for example, have been paused as a result of the current circumstances or simply have been pushed down into the pipeline of services that we have. So just that's first thought of how we are going to prioritize those services. And of course, thinking really long and hard about what our capacity is going to be once we are able to be back up and running and how much more we're able to take on. But I just want to throw that out there.
Bryan.
I don't think prioritizing is going to be that big a problem, because I think it's going to be very slow to begin with. You know, we have projects that are on the books and are, we'll start with those to begin with, but I think there's going to be a lot of financial difficulties for a lot of museums and galleries. And I think that clients also are going to be more cautious about their expenditures. Simply because there's so much, the whole country being shut down, there's money's gotten very scarce. So I think that it's going to be pretty slow for quite a while.
Jonathan.
Yeah, it'll also be slow because our behavior is going to have to change in advance of getting some kind of a vaccine. We will need to do things that we've never had to do before, like not touch our faces, you know, keep our PPE on until we're in a place where we can safely remove it. And all of that behavior will lead to really slow services. Everything's going to take just a lot longer.
Fritz?
I see initially there will be actually, once the doors open up again, the gates open up again, there are a lot of museum loans that are stuck all over the world. And there is going to be a high priority to trying to get those things back to their home institutions. So I see a little bit of a glut initially on trying to get that work done. And that will be priority, that work, and then it will slow down after that. I agree. Business will not come back to 100% for a long time to come. We have to change the way we're doing business. But I see, initially there will be a struggle to get things done, and the struggle will be, capacity issues on many different levels, including air freight and airline issues. There are a lot of flights canceled that will not come back very quickly. And budgets that were given a year ago or 2 years ago for some exhibitions are completely out the window right now, because air freight has become extremely expensive, despite the fact that the fuel prices have come down so far. It's a capacity issue, because a lot of freight in this world travels in the bellies of wide-body passenger flights. They're all canceled, so all of that freight has moved to cargo flights, and you can't get space on a cargo flight unless you pay an extreme premium right now, and that will last for a while.
Yes, Anna?
Yes, I want to bring this input. I think it's important almost in Europe or in Spain, because there is like a very different ways to understand how we are going back to the business. In one side, we have our state or official institutions and museums. They have different restrictions. They can do by their own decisions, but the government and the ministries are actually deciding, and they need to follow. And we have signed contracts. We need to perform for them. So this is a different way to answer all their needs. And this field is more delayed than the others, than the private world. I mean, the galleries, private collectors didn't stop. And we are doing smaller things, but we didn't stop. In that part of the business, we are able to choose or to prioritize what we accept to do or what we can do, because we have this time limit in our activity all the time when this ERTE is still there, like happens to Healthcare with their 90%. So we need to work in parallel, these two worlds. The administrative world that oblige us to work the 30% of our time, and the other world, which is the needs, transport needs, and we need to program very well to combine these two things.
All right, we're gonna go for some more questions from the live chat. Robin, what's next?
So this one just popped up, but I think it's a question a lot of people have. It says, about institutions who have already received loan shipments for exhibitions that have since been canceled. Are the crates sitting indefinitely, or are return shipments currently happening with you all?
Maybe we can go to Marco since he hasn't spoken much. Have you seen that? And then we'll go to Bob.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Oh yeah, no worries. It says, so about institutions who have already received loan shipments or who you guys are working with for exhibitions that have since been canceled, are the crates sitting indefinitely, or are return shipments currently happening right now?
You mean the return of empty crates, or just in general, if the loans are being returned?
Think of the loans. I know that just talking to people amongst our community, there's just worry of where their artifacts are and kind of where they're handled.
Right.
Yeah, right
Yeah,
now.
what we see is we get a lot of clients that are sending requests out to their lenders in order to see if they can prolong the loan. That's happening all around, because in the Netherlands, all the museums are closed, and they are not allowed. Most of them are not willing or allowed to do any transport. So most museums are going to ask for permission to keep the loans in their museum. So ask for an extension of the loan contract.
Bob, are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, I agree. There are lots of extensions going on. We have had some requests for pieces going back, but there's really nothing moving. So either if something is going back, it's either sitting, it should be sitting with the museum. There were, as Jonathan said before, there was a bunch of disruption along the way when this first started, and there were shuttles that just stopped, and those pieces should be sitting in climate control warehouses, wherever that trucker happens to be based. And I think that's the way it is. And yes, and shows are also we've seen shows being pushed out, or we're getting emails saying, yes, the show is going to happen, but it's going to be a year from now. And so a lot of the loans haven't taken place. We did have one institution that we do work with that has canceled all loans through the end of next year, through the end of 21, which I thought was extreme.
Wow. Something that has come up in the online chat that seems related to this discussion is, if possible, will you see, as a result of the low oil price and the high air freight charges because of the scarcity of flights, will shipments, if possible, move from air freight to trucking? I mean, it seems logical, right? Maybe there's even more availability. Yeah, Fritz?
Domestically, there isn't a lot of art being shipped by air, and internationally, you're not going to truck it. It's still going to go by air. If anything, and not so much on the museum side, but more in the commercial world, we will see more traffic going towards ocean freight, more art being shipped by ocean freight, which right now obviously is not something that's happening a whole lot. And I can see going forward that we will see a lot more of that.
All right, John, then Simon.
I think one of the things you'll also see is institutions making decisions about couriers in the short run. As Fritz mentioned earlier, there's a lot of freight sitting out there at museums. A lot of institutions have loans that have been out and are stuck in places now, and there's going to be a decision made whether or not freight will be expedited to come back when cargo routes and passenger flights start operating, juxtaposed with what's the appetite for couriers to travel and stay in hotels and things like that. So I think there'll be some new parameters around sending couriers and allowing couriers and sharing with institutions and trusting your sister institutions around the world to take care of the freight, and for the fine art forwarders, affecting more supervisions, a little more transparency with photographs and FaceTiming and things like that to get stuff moving again when it does open up, because there will be government restrictions on travel to certain places for passengers. We're already seeing freight moving on freighters and trying to get stuff moved around where we can get stuff out of warehouses and onto planes and things like that. So I think that's one of the first things you're really going to see as freight starts opening up again.
Simon?
Yeah, I wanted to mention sea freight because it's also hugely impacted by cost increases. There's a shortage of reefer containers at the moment. I think a lot of them are being used for medical purposes or by hospitals, and costs for reefer shipments by sea freight are about 4 times what they would be at normal times. And the prices that you can get are also given on a sort of an ad hoc basis that they can change from day to day, from week to week, and it's very volatile.
Jonathan, and then we're going to go to more questions from the chat.
Yeah, I would also like everyone to think about the concept of hazard pay, because until there's a vaccine, any kind of activity with couriers for flights, if restrictions are lifted, you should think about what kind of hazard pay, because what happens if an employee of yours is infected while they're traveling? That's a huge liability issue.
I'll get it. they're going live. Who is this? We've got a
It's
call-in
Bryan.
show now. Yeah.
Brian's gone. I'll
Guilty.
Robin, other questions from the chat section?
Sure. This is one for more. Let's think of the future for a little bit, just to think more positively.
We're gonna do
So-
future, and then we're gonna do couriers, okay? Because couriers is a huge one.
Yes, for sure. So this one is, when should we start reforecasting future budgets with you all as shippers? Would you like the information sooner rather than later, or should we wait for the market updates this summer, or when should we start kind of looking at everything?
Yeah, let's go for Meg.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, the estimates that we provide, I think the answer to that would be yes, all of the above, because I think it's going to be a work in progress in terms of the availability of materials and services. And I think that a good rule is that the more information you have earlier, the more you can keep things updated and work on these estimates as they evolve and as services become available, as materials become available again. So I think that this is going to be a lot more work in the short term, is creating these budgets for shows and creating estimates for shipments.
Does anyone not want the estimates and the requests as soon as possible? Would anyone want clients to wait? Let's rephrase it that way. So pretty much, if you have it, if you have a request, put it out there to your shipper. Derek, you have a response to that?
I think kind of following up on Meg was saying, though, is that like the estimate you get will probably change, though, right? Because we don't know how we're going to operate. So, I mean, I think the question is accurate. Is it worth sending the estimate request right now? And I think to get all of the background information together so you can start building that estimate, but knowing that, the social distancing or the crating or whatever it might be doing, it may be completely different than what we think. Obviously there's air freight, not knowing what that's going to be costing and all that kind of jazz throws everything out the window. So if you're getting that budget, it's really preliminary. And so who knows what the percentage of difference expense there will be at that time, So I think it's good to get preliminary information in and start putting it all together. But I'd also say that every estimate that's given for anything that's major right now, at least, is probably a guesstimate more than a true estimate like we're used to doing.
Got it. Bryan, you want to add something?
Well, I think it depends on the nature of the job. I mean, obviously, if you're shipping something, those costs are going to not be accurate by the time the job actually happens. But for crating and packing and warehouse work and installation, sculpture rigging, things like that, I think you can estimate them and pretty much stick to the estimate, because a lot of those costs aren't going to change. The materials may go up a little bit or something, but it's not going to be to the extent that the air freight has skyrocketed or these other costs have. So I think from our standpoint, we're more than happy to receive the estimates and work on them, and can probably hold to them.
Anna?
Yes, I'm not saying that estimate is not important. Of course, it is a big part. But nowadays, and due to the COVID, to find the proper logistic way, I think this is our goal. This is very uncertain program by the air companies now. They need to change the type of aircraft, the frequency. I mean, nothing is fixed now. It's really, they need to really move their fleet in favor to the business, and the business is moving in a different way as has been moving during years. So they need to adapt all these capabilities to this business, and we need to follow. There is no option for us. I think we need to actually follow what air companies are doing and try to find the best way. We need time to do that. we need to talk with them to ensure that this flight is still going on, this is the right size we need, all these things that in the past were like very fixed, very regular, but there is no regularity anymore now.
Meg, you have a follow-up?
And just to kind of add into what Derek was saying, which I think is kind of an important point, is the one thing that we don't know is how, putting protocols in our workplaces for social distancing and the wearing of PPE, how that's going to affect production of objects like building a crate or packing a crate. Those might, whatever we end up doing might create a slower timeline or require fewer people working longer hours, things like that. And so I think that it's correct to say that a lot of those costs are going to be up in the air. But things like understanding how many crates you're going to need or what kind of packing method you're going to be utilizing, those are things that we can still talk about. And planning for those things now is going to be important so that when things do start up, we have a sense of what it's going to take to complete the packing specifications for each type of object.
Let's move on to couriers now, because this is a big topic right now. Robin, do you have any questions related to that? I mean, a big one is safety, of course, but what are you seeing?
I think a lot of people are
chat.
concerned about health and safety, obviously, is what we're seeing a lot of. Someone just popped in with one saying, do you foresee instituting higher rates or hazard pays for jobs that request on-site packing in institutions or lenders, private residences, which isn't really related, but kind of. I think there's just a general concern on how we're going to handle the situation.
Go ahead, Fritz. You started, and then we'll go to Bob.
All right. Well, couriers. One of the thing is, I wonder when we can get couriers and cargo flights. That may be a while. So it may not even be possible for a courier to be on the plane, traveling with the art. And then the next thing is, will the courier really want to sit on the truck with a team in such a small confined space? I mean, there's one thing about social distancing. A lot of the stuff that we can do, we can put proper protocols in place. But if you put a courier on the truck, that's it. It all stays in the window, doesn't go out the window. So all these things will need to be considered, and I think we will see a lot more work done virtually with FaceTime or Zoom conferencing and remote inspections, and maybe a lot of trust developing between institutions of allowing a borrowing institution to do the outgoing condition report for the return. Etc. So I think, things will change, and these are the things that we have to consider going forward.
Go ahead, Bob.
So we actually started talking about this in our office last week, and I touched base with 6 or 7 domestic truckers about, will they take couriers? And my expectation was they would all say no. And of the people I've talked to, only one so far has definitively said no. I have a bunch of maybes. Some people haven't responded. So I was surprised, to be honest, that the trucking companies would even allow it. Jonathan can talk better to that, but from our standpoint, as a freight broker in this, personally, I don't think I'm comfortable putting couriers on trucks, for the courier's health and for the trucker's health. And one of the things we've talked about is it has to be equitable. If you're going to expect if the courier wants the drivers to wear a mask and gloves, then the courier has to be expected to do the same thing. And so the museums and all the vendors all have to be on the same page. And it's something we all have to work on. But I was shocked at how many of the trucking companies were like, yeah, it's okay for right now.
Go ahead, Paige, and then we'll go to Meg and then to Simon.
I think what Bob mentioned about that anticipation or thinking about clients, not just in terms of couriers, but that's something that we've been talking about a lot internally, because as art shippers or whatever service we're providing, to foresee that our client or whoever we're interacting with might not have the same standards or expectations of PPE that we have established for ourselves, or even going one step further and having extra material or equipment or supplies or masks or whatever it may be on hand to be able to provide to that person, I think is something that we're trying to establish. But of course that coincides with social norms and if that's appropriate to offer it to someone or not, and how to handle that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That's something that we're definitely grappling with.
Go ahead, Meg.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just would like to take this moment to encourage a possible idea for the future for my American peers in the group, is that I think that it's going to be really important that we collaborate in our industry to create a universal set of protocols in terms of how our workers wear PPE, social distancing, and how we operate in these situations that up until now we've all kind of dealt with individually as companies and as institutions. But going forward, we should probably really think about collaborating to come up with a shared set of protocols and directives, so that when our employees go to another institution or when somebody else's truck is coming into your warehouse, you can be assured that they will be following the same rules that you have laid out for your own employees, rules that will ensure that they're at least meeting sort of minimum safety standards in the place of being able to protect someone completely. We should be able to ensure all of our workers that when they interact with other people in the industry, those people are taking the same steps that they are to protect themselves from this virus.
Go ahead, Simon, and then we'll go to John.
Yeah, these questions regarding the expectations of museums to have couriers traveling in transatlantic trips to accompany their works is something that's been discussed previously related to climate change, and if it is really justifiable to have business class tickets for couriers to accompany the works. And it is a conversation that has become quite current in the last 2 years, of people talking about, really, is that the case? Now with coronavirus, this is just exacerbating the system to the point where, as Fritz said, institutions will need to think about technological solutions to this. Also build the trust between institutions so that that they have a response to this and they are responsible, because it is a health issue and it is also a climate change issue.
Go ahead, John.
I was just going to mention, as for the original question about hazard pay, we're seeing at the airlines right now that the cargo handling companies and the people inside the warehouses are getting hit especially hard around the country, especially at the busier airports. These are essential businesses, are on the front lines, with couriers right now not being allowed on freighters, with no passenger flights, and with, as Fritz mentioned, access to the warehouses probably being tied up. It's even more necessary for our guys to get in there. So we are offering hazard pay to a lot of our airport reps who live inside the cargo warehouses, overseeing and handling freight. It's something to keep in mind, that as far as the supply chain goes, besides capacity and rates, there's workers and workers packed amongst each other in these cargo warehouses on top of each other. We've seen a lot of deaths out of JFK, a lot of people calling in sick, skeleton crews working. So even when freight is moving, it gets stuck in there. And it's even more important to have people inside there trying to get stuff done. But it is one of the more hazardous aspects, on top of trucking and art handling and all that stuff as well.
To those of you listening out there, would your institutions offer hazard pay if you absolutely feel that you have to send a courier? And would your institutions, or maybe even the companies here, offer PPE, protective equipment, masks and suits if you do feel like you have to send a courier or handle a courier? Just putting that out there. Derek, you have a comment?
Well, I guess to get to that PPE, I think all of us would we're trying to get our protocols in place for the PPE, but even just getting PPE right now is really difficult. So we've had people trying to order that stuff since March 1. And we've been struggling to get all that. But, honestly, and I think that we're in an industry where it's generally very caring people that we work with, right? And so in that idea, like, we know, like at Atelier, everybody's family to us. So like, I truly wouldn't send anybody out where I wouldn't send my wife or my father or whoever else. If it wasn't safe for them, I also wouldn't send out any of our crews, right? And I don't think any institution should do that for a courier either. And so I think if collectively, like Meg was saying, there's you get this idea together where you're thinking about it as if you would treat your family. And obviously there's an evolution every 3 days. It's a completely different world every 3 days. So whatever that's like, as we get closer to coming back to the world that we're supposed to live in again, that, as a group, there is some standardized practices that would be based around the idea of how would you protect your family in that situation.
Jonathan, and then we're going to go to more questions from the chat.
I wanted to tie this together with what Simon mentioned before. Simon and I were both on an environmental focused session back last November in Philadelphia. And this is an incredible opportunity we have here right now, because take a look at the skies and the waters everywhere. I saw a video of jellyfish swimming in the canals of Venice. This is what happens when you reduce carbon emissions. So, of course, if the people who make a lot of money by trading oil futures don't stop their practices, we're not going to see renewable energy come up very fast. But it's an opportunity, and it's also an opportunity for us to take advantage of technology, because I think a lot of the courier needs can be handled by a lot of smart applications. So a great opportunity could come out of this.
Okay. Anna, I gotta go to more questions from the, do you have a quick response?
Yes, just to tell that I fully agree what John and Jonathan said about technology. We have an opportunity to demonstrate that there are like GPS systems. We can provide a code to our client, and they can follow all the way of the transport, or making photos, videos, online visual information. I think this would be great, and it could save a lot of money. That money that everybody will not have to perform the exhibitions. In a way, we could, if institutions could share a courier, for example, to the origin airport, and then the other institution from the destination airport.
Yeah, exactly. You don't actually have to send somebody. You can trust more the people on the other end.
I mean, right now you have no choice.
Yeah.
At the same time,
yeah, well, you're not sending anything either.
At the same time, we can prevent the virus.
Robin, more questions?
Sure. Another big topic of conversation is about workflows, how when everyone starts up again, how we're going to be handled. I think the general fear is that there's going to be a giant bottleneck situation come September. So a lot of the people are asking just kind of how you all are thinking about workflows.
All right, Meg, and then John, and then Fritz.
I mean, I think from a productions point of view, where we're actually, thinking about building crates and packing crates, we also anticipate that there might be a bottleneck, which is one of the reasons I'm going to use this as an opportunity to say to all of our clients who are watching that this is a good time to start talking about our plans for that eventual future, and talking about what the expectations for these jobs are going to be, and start thinking about it. We might not be able to answer a lot of the questions of timelines and how things are going to work once we establish new safety protocols and such. But I think that the more groundwork that's laid right now in terms of logistics planning, the easier the eventual kind of bottleneck will be. I mean, I would say that the fall is usually a pretty busy time regardless. So and that's obviously going to be probably very different this time around. But it's something that if now we plan for some sort of framework for that period, we'll probably get through it a lot better.
John?
I think for Masterpiece, as for the most part, non-asset-based 3PL, we're spending a lot of our time right now collating information from airlines, airline handling companies, our in-house travel agents, from various government sites and updates, so we can be best prepared to see what we can offer and what's available at the time when stuff does start ramping up. I agree with most of the panel that there'll be an initial push of things returning from where they're going, or where they've been stuck for a while. And then as exhibitions ramp up, things will be moving quickly. So we're trying to ramp up an information sort of protocol with vendors around the country, foreign agents around, as well as getting our turtle crate stock ready so that we have a quick and easy way to turn crates around without too much work and time for them or having to pack them. They're easily disinfected, things to that extent. I'm sure Marco can talk to more of that aspect about the innovative and sustainable aspect of that as well to get stuff moving quickly. But we're trying to, in this time, up as much information as possible so when stuff does start coming in, we can react quickly and find solutions for our clients right out across the board.
Fritz, go ahead.
There you go. Sorry, problem with unmuting myself. Maybe that's probably better anyway. So I just want to follow up on this John. I agree. I think there will be an initial spike in shipments that need to happen right away, that are in the pipeline already right now and have been stuck and will move. But then, you know, as Bryan Cooke earlier said, things are going to be slow for a while. The business is not going to come back to the level we have seen in the past few years for quite a while. So, so really what we have to prepare for workflows, number one, I need to keep my team together and engaged right now. And we're working very hard on doing that. And so we have, you know, 80% of our crew still fully employed and trying to keep them engaged every single day with training and keeping them sharp and having them ready for when things open up again. And I certainly hope that's going to be sooner than later. And then the other thing is workflows. We really have to be the capacities and in the various trade lanes and logistics lanes. That's going to be the biggest issue. So really realistic expectations for everybody. What's possible? How fast can it be done? You know, things are not going to be very quickly how they always were. It will take more time. It will be more expensive, and people will have to be a little bit patient.
Marco, I want to ask this question of you, the same question about workflows, but from a European perspective, especially where countries like Germany seem to be willing to start more slowly opening up, and any other Europeans after Marco, if you want to respond, that would be great.
Right. Yeah. In Europe, the situation is a bit different than in the US, although there are also a lot of various restrictions per country. Like, for example, we have 2 offices, one in The Hague and one in Antwerp, but we are not allowed to go to Belgium. So we have to wait for all those restrictions to be released. What we are doing now is we have a lot of staff that is taking compensation days, and we are also taking the opportunity to train our staff. What we would have usually done in a couple of months, we can now do in weeks, because we will do it by Zoom, and we've set up extensive training courses to get everybody up to speed. Let's say the junior project manager, for example.
Marco, what kind of training are you doing?
So we have a couple of junior project managers that are not really trained yet to deal with air freight shipments. So we have the senior project managers come up with fake shipments, let's just say, and then practice them and get them through all the lists and all the requirements, just to make sure that if things start up again, our full staff is up to speed with all the training. So we offer trucking, storage, and packing, and for us it's a bit easier on the packing side because we have a large fleet of turtles that are just ready to go. So on that side, it's a bit easier for us for crating, and also, if there is any question about, for example, crates that need to be disinfected, like the turtle crates are actually quite good for that because they can be easily treated with a disinfectant. But in general, we have to wait until the regulations are released in the different countries to see what we can do and what our clients are expecting. If they can travel.
I imagine, as many pointed out, that we do expect to see a big spike in shipments as things open up, but it seems that that spike will be very distributed, if you will, because not every country will open up at the same time. So, for example, if Germany opens up soon, even on a reduced level, then we'll see maybe other countries to follow. So, but I guess, when you deal with it country by country, it might actually be several little spikes as opposed to one giant spike. Does that seem plausible to you, to everyone?
I think that this would be extremely asymmetrical, as you say. And all of the assumptions, of course, that we're making today completely change tomorrow and day after day after day. If you take, there are websites that you can look at, you could see the activity in terms of international freighters moving in and out. And as you mentioned, it's not all the same in Europe. Like France is really, really constrained, whereas Switzerland and Germany, Hungary, for some reason, has like a lot of freighters coming in and out of it. I don't know why.
Interesting. So we're pretty far into this now. It's been an hour and 40 minutes, and I do want to give everyone a moment, if they want, to address concerns maybe that they've seen from clients. If there's something that, a question that you repeatedly see that you want them to know, maybe from your perspective, any special ask of the audience. Is there anyone that has anything to offer? Go ahead, Derek.
I think, Meg was talking about earlier, it's just like an open line of communication. So I know there's some exhibitions that are going to cancel, some that are going to get added, just knowing that everybody's talking, staying in communication and knowing that we're here, just to be a resource, at least to just chat, even if we can't provide answers because we don't know what the next step is, at least get a boundary of what we think we're coming back to. And then obviously, like Jonathan said, everything changes every day. So if we got to change that boundary the next day, at least we have a perspective of what's going to be like.
Yep. And Meg, and then Bob.
And just to kind of reiterate again, I know I've said it a couple times, but I do think that, going forward, working with institutions and partner businesses, peers in the industry, to come up with what can look like a universal set of safety protocols and guidelines that we apply for all of our workers. I think that's going to be something that I would really like to see sort of encouraged. And I hope that we can all as an industry kind of reach out to each other and be transparent with the policies that we put in place so that we can share those policies.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
First of all, I totally agree with Meg, but what I would like everyone to remember is we all need a huge dose of patience. Museums are going to need patience with us as we try to work through everyone's problems. And we need patience, us as vendors need to be patient with the museums who are also trying to work through things that they really don't have the answers to. And that we are all, as a collective business, we're all out for one thing, which is the safety of our people and the safety of the objects. And that's sort of the underlying piece of information that we all have to remember.
Go ahead, Fritz, and then Jonathan.
One thing we all have to remember, there's a lot of people being left behind right now that are struggling. And so I think one of the things that we need to think about, what can we do as a community to help those people? I mean, there are a lot of technicians that worked in museums and galleries with absolutely zero safety net. So we need to think about those people. There's service providers, smaller companies that have a really, really hard time going through this crisis right now. How can we help them? Can we, can we as Dietl International, we buy a lot of services from a lot of these companies. What can I do to help them with their cash flow to get them through this? What what can our clients do to help us get through this? So I have a lot of discussions with clients right now asking for discounts, you know, on services that were provided last year. It's kind of difficult to entertain that right now, but these are conversations that we have. But really, what we have to think about, like, who's left behind? What can we as a community also do to help those people? And I think that is something to discuss as well.
And Fritz, you also started, sorry, Jonathan, 1 second. Fritz, you started something for assistance for art handlers. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
Yes, that is correct. You know, we employ a lot of art handlers, technicians year-round. Most of them, almost all of them, are artists that work on a freelance basis. They work on projects, they travel the world, and you know, by choice. I mean, I always try to place them into permanent jobs when I can, but most of them by choice for many, many years now have been very happy to be on the freelance circuit. And all of a sudden, for them, absolutely the bottom dropped out. There's absolutely zero work. And so we were thinking about, and I consider a lot of them my friends, and we were thinking about, like, hey, what can we do to help these people? And so it's not really much, but it's something to bring attention to them. We created a website where we offer their artwork directly to interested buyers. We're also right now establishing a fund, an emergency relief fund, where they can apply for payments, tax-free payments up to $2,500 for real emergencies. We're still establishing that, but so I'm working on that right now as well.
And what's the website?
It's Dietl.com. So
okay, you can get it there.
The portal to the artist page where you can buy artwork. And I encourage everybody, if you have a little bit of extra money to spare, there's a lot of really absolutely amazing stuff on it. Go there, buy it. You will buy it directly from the artists. So you will help these people directly. We are just really opening up the platform. That's all we do.
Okay, Jonathan, last guess.
Okay,
for the
yeah. I just want to remind everyone that even though most of us have a fear of change, because we don't know what it's going to look like next year or even 6 months from now, don't be afraid of change, because the opportunities are going to be huge for us, and we're a very adaptable species. We can really amaze ourselves. Let's look for these opportunities. Let's be better than we were, and maybe the landscape will completely change, and our businesses of all the art handling companies here, they may change. They may have vertical growth. They may have horizontal growth, contraction. Museums may serve a slightly different purpose. We can't be afraid of change.
Great. I think this is a good final point, unless anyone else has something else to add.
Well,
there was one. Sorry, go ahead, Bryan.
Just stay optimistic, stay happy. We'll get through this. And, you know, museum community and all the art handlers and all of us in business, you know, we're strong people. And so I'm very optimistic about the future, and it's not going to be easy, but we'll get there. And thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this talk.
Of course. Simon, there was one specific question aimed at you, which had to do, of course, with any pressure that Brexit might present on the situation. Have there any government indications?
No, the whole subject of Brexit has hardly been mentioned in the last month, which is quite a breather for us, actually, because we were all sick of it. But when that comes back, when the question of the deadlines are rethought, because the deadline was the 31st of December when the transition period ends. If that is actually feasible now, I don't know. I believe that the European Parliament and the UK politicians are doing Zoom meetings like this to try to move it on. But I would say it's going to be delayed, or maybe has to be rethought completely. Well, I would like that to happen, actually, because I think it's all a little bit too fast now, especially with all of these problems that have delayed everything.
Yep, I hear you. Okay, with that, I want to thank everybody for participating. I want to introduce you all again. There are some people that joined late and didn't get the initial introduction. So just raise your hand when I present you again. So thank you very much to Bob Simon from TCI, from Meg Colbert from Boxart, Ana Tabuenca from SIT from SEAT in Spain, Simon Dent from Martinspeed in the UK, Marco Oosterwjk from Turtle in Hiskia, Fritz Dietl from Dietl International, Brian Cooke from Cooke's Crating in Los Angeles, Derek Jones from Atelier, Philadelphia, New York, Paige Armstrong from Crozier, Jonathan Schwartz from Isofat and Atelier 4, and John O'Halloran from Masterpiece International. Really appreciate everybody for joining in. I also want to take a moment to appreciate all of the ARC sponsors. This is super important just because we depend on them, and none of this happens without them. So as I mentioned, Isofat's the platinum sponsor. Gold sponsorship includes Cooke's Crating, TTI Bovis, Arteria, Axial, Apice, Lucidea, Atelier, Turtle. Silver sponsors include Masterpiece, Bonsai, Atelier 4, Cordova Plaza, Dietl, LP Art, Collector Systems, Boxart, Total Fine Arts, Willis Towers Watson, CSI, Liberty International Underwriters, Interlinea, HTB, Huntington T Block. Bronze sponsors include Anacom, Crozier, Edict, Global Specialized Transport, Martinspeed Mobile, PACART, SIT, and TCI. Everybody deserves recognition because this is from the conference to all the programming, ARCS depends on it. So thank you very much. And thanks for making time to participate today. As usual, we're going to release this conversation as a podcast later in the week, usually on the Friday after. The podcast can be listened to and it will be released on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. Please subscribe so you get all the latest episodes, and don't forget to give us a 5-star review. Yeah, we need that because it means you are pointing more people to the podcast.
You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, and whenever we go live, you'll get a direct indication or notification on your phone and your YouTube channel saying we've gone live. So please remember us on there as well.
Lastly, if you are a member of ARCS, as you should be, you can continue the conversation on the ARCS forum via the website. And you can also find us on social media using the hashtag ARCSChat or at ARCS4All. And we can keep talking about this because obviously questions will continue to arise. We only have one more regularly scheduled ARCSChat in May, but if as the situation keeps changing, we might end up doing other special episodes. So stay tuned. If anybody wants to reach out to a member of the panel, you can always reach us through info@arcsinfo.org, and we can redirect your questions if you don't already have their emails. And once again, thanks again to everyone for participating and everyone who contributed via the chat and was listening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.